Friday, January 26th, here on the Just Baseball Show. Guys, it's the first off-season mailbag, so we have to harmonize. 3, 2, 1, mailbag.
As Aram takes a sip of his water. Wow. Like, dude,
So
I brought my
disrespectful.
SpongeBob mug for this. And Aram's like, oh no, I'm too cool to harmonize on the mailbag, whatever.
And before we get to the mailbag, asked on our Instagram and our Twitter at Just Baseball Show on Instagram, at JustBB_media on Twitter. We got to talk about the Hall of Fame inductees 2024. Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, first ballot. Todd Helton gets in on his 6th year on the ballot. And Jack wants to talk about Jim Leland, and deservedly so. But first, it is all brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Ladies and gentlemen, the offer is still available. $5, you put down $5 at BetMGM, use code JustBaseball, and they will give you $158 in bonus bets. We talked about in the last episode. We've been talking about it since the offer went live. It's an absolute no-brainer to get your free money. Remember to bet responsibly, 21 or older. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. We have 10 questions, and I'm very excited. A lot of good ones. We got north of 80 questions, and we had to, I went through all of them. There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of kind of fun baseball questions, right? There was a lot of, are the Mets going to make a move this offseason?
Probably.
Probably. But I think it's more fun to go through the weeds on some others. Gentlemen, how are we? Let's talk Hall of Fame.
Good. I feel a little bit more like the UC system now than I did coming into this episode, like the University of California system. Did you see how many applicants UCLA and UC Davis and Irvine got this year? UCLA got like 120,000 applicants, which is insane.
Aram, that's what he wants to start the episode with.
Yes, college admissions.
Let's
dial in, baby.
That's crazy.
What else do you guys want to talk about? Anything fun?
I mean,
Jim Leland.
Yeah.
That's a guy you wanted to start with.
Just me.
Hall of Fame. Well, first of all, we got our guy Kevin Henry out there. One of our newest additions to the editorial staff. Really excited about what he brings to the table. And perfect example is that guy's freezing his butt off in Cooperstown right now, covering that for us. So keep an eye out on justbaseball.com and on our socials. I think he's going to be able to get some time with Todd Helton and do some cool things there. So look out for that. Really excited for the coverage there. And I'll just start off with Helton because I'm really pumped about it. Like I knew that Beltre was going to be, we all knew Beltre was going to be a first ballot Hall, but you look at the numbers, you cannot poke a hole in that guy's, career. And then on top of that, he overcame so much adversity in the early stages of his career. I think he had I don't want to know what the exact numbers. We'll Google it in a moment about how much of his intestines was taken out early in his career. And he overcame that and was phenomenal. But starting with Helton, I was getting a little bit nervous. I didn't know if Helton was going to stall out. And, if he may not end up getting in because of the conversations that we've had so much through the years, which is how much do you dock a guy for Coors? Are people going to change their mind on that? And it's just one of those things that I just didn't really know what was going to change and if people were going to be able to overlook that. And I'm glad that they have been able to, because at the end of the day, I don't care where you're playing. If you hit 372 one season, if you hit 316 for your career, and by the way, he also hit bombs too. And I understand that it's easier to hit bombs there, but it's not easy to hit 49 bombs there. He did that. 369 home runs for his career. But if you hit 316 for the duration of your career, you're a Hall of Famer. I don't care if you did it at Coors. So I'm glad that he got in and, by all accounts, he's a phenomenal dude as well. So always good to add more good people into the Hall.
Yeah, we also have a stat that quantifies hitting in different ballparks, right? OPS plus. He put up a 133 OPS plus for his career. So you can factor Coors into that, but all of the ballparks are factored into that as well because it's park adjusted. And a 133 OPS plus is nothing to sniff at. That is, upwards of what a Hall of Famer should be. And then when you put in the WAR and then you factor in a 300, 400, 500 slash line for his career, and there were years where Hall of Fame voters didn't like him when he was in Coors in the Hall of Fame ballot, and they didn't like him in the MVP race. There were plenty
Yep.
of years where he was an MVP caliber player, but then got docked down the ballot. That's why it's hard to go off these awards. And when we look at the career of Todd Helton, maybe not a first ballot, but if you think Joey Votto is an easy first ballot Hall of Famer, Joey Votto will get in, then you probably think Todd Helton is, because they have very similar numbers.
And also, like, it's probably not the same as Coors, but playing your whole career in Great American Small Park, like that helps too. So
Number two
again,
on Savant. It's number two
yeah,
ballpark on Savant to Coors Field.
It's that's the thing. So I think it's a great point there. Like, I don't think Votto's numbers look the way that they do if he doesn't play his games in Cincinnati. And again, that's not to take away from Votto, but I just want to make sure that we're either not applying it continuously or applying it continuously. The last thing I'll say before I kick it to Jack is on Peter's point. How do you hit three? And remember, I was talking about how one of my favorite things to do, like, is just to pass time, is look at like the MVPs that or the MVP candidates who did not win in like the early 2000s or late 90s. Todd Helton slashed 372, 463, 698. So he led the league in batting average, OBP, and slugging. He led the league in hits. He led the league in runs driven in, and he hit 42 home runs that year. And he came in fifth in MVP voting. You know who won the MVP that year?
Barry Bonds.
You'll never guess.
Who?
What year again?
So this would have been, this was in 2000.
Wasn't Barry Bonds when
it wasn't Bonds, because Bonds was
he was the runner-up.
2004.
He was the runner-up.
Who was it?
The funniest part is the guy who won was Bonds' teammate.
In San Francisco?
Oh, man.
Jeff Kent.
Oh.
Kent had what, 45 homers that year as a second baseman?
No.
40 homers?
No.
How many homers?
That's the fucking problem. 334, 424, 596 / phenomenal year. 33 homers. Todd Helton had him beaten every single statistic. Every single one, except for stolen bases. Jeff Kent had 12. Todd Helton had 5.
Well, that's the difference right there.
Yeah, I think that's what voters were looking at. If you look at WAR, 8-9 for Helton, 7-2 for Kent. So again, it's a fun rabbit hole if you're ever really bored. But also, to Peter's point, if we're gonna use accolades to say like, okay, well, this guy didn't win an MVP, like, is he in? He should have. So let's not make the same mistake twice, right? Like, let's not validate a mistake with another mistake. So I'm glad he's in.
Couple of former quarterbacks too. Todd Helton started at quarterback over Peyton Manning at the University of Tennessee. People forget. We weren't alive for it, but I've always kind of thought that was a weird quirk. And then Joe Mauer was committed to play quarterback for Bobby Bowden at Florida State.
5-star.
Five-star. Like,
Joe Mauer
number
was
one player in the country.
He was one of the best high school athletes ever.
So I saw a video resurface a couple days ago. It was a couple days before the Hall of Fame announcement, and it was Mauer's Twins jersey retirement, and they invited the one guy that struck him out in high school out to throw up the first pitch to Joe Mauer. He struck out once.
I sent that clip in, or that clip was sent in a group chat with a few of my high school baseball teammates because one of the players on our team that no one would have suspected to get a hit, like, hit a double the other way off of Tuki Toussaint and bounced him from the game. And that's why, so I was like, replied to that. I was like, oh, Tuki Toussaint's retirement jersey, like retirement ceremony here. But like, it's
with
funny,
the White Sox.
Yeah, with the White Sox after he has 10 straight 2.2 ERA seasons. But no, that when you can isolate one person and be like, oh yeah, that's the guy that struck him out. Like, yeah, that's pretty fucking crazy.
Insane.
Did you guys see that story that Tom Verducci was talking about on MLB Network?
With Scherzer adding the cutter just to get Mauer.
That story I thought was so cool. So, go check that out. We reposted it on our TikTok, so you can go see through our repost to see the full story. But basically, Max Scherzer was consistently trying to pitch Joe Mauer in. But Joe Mauer was so stubborn, and he would still hit these liners the other way for base hits. Joe Mauer absolutely owned Max Scherzer. And then what Max Scherzer had to do was he had to develop a new pitch to get out Joe Mauer. And a couple of years later, he finally strikes out Joe Mauer for the first time in his career on a cutter inside in on his hands. And then Verducci said that 10 years later, Scherzer is still throwing that pitch. So he had to make up some sort of pitch in order to get out Joe Mauer. And Joe Mauer, I really want to talk about too, because amazing career, no doubt Hall of Famer. I was surprised that he got in easily, right? First ballot, got most of the vote, right? When we're looking at the total vote tally, he got 76.1%. You need 75% to get into the Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about Billy Wagner in a second. Snubbed again, down 1.2%, but this is about Joe Mauer. Tons of batting titles we know. 10-year peak, incredible. If you look at Jaws on Baseball Reference, which grades your peak years in terms of your WAR more aggressively, and that's what a lot of Hall of Fame voters like. He is definitely a Hall of Famer. Were you guys surprised, Jack, we'll start with you, that he was first ballot, or do you think he just deserved first ballot?
No, he deserved first ballot. I thought like it made a ton of sense. I think both those guys, Helton and Mauer, we haven't even talked about Beltre yet. It was the highest vote getter, but
we will.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But also, remember when I'm blanking on his name. You would know. Remember when that guy just randomly tweeted, like middle of the night, went on this crazy spree, and he said Beltre had a guy in center field in Arlington waving a white towel when a breaking ball was coming. What's his name? What's that guy's name?
Oh God, I actually forgot who that is, but that was brutal.
Brutal Twitter fingers, and he went on this rant.
I've had a funny exchange with that guy. It's
what's his name?
Forgot. Don't need to validate him though.
Insane, but we'll get to that in a moment. I do think it really helps that Helton and Mauer both played with the same team their entire career, and I think that this was probably a Votto bump too, and a Yadier Molina bump. When those guys do end up on the ballot, they're going to be helped immensely by playing their entire career with one team. Because guess what? The old people voters, they love that shit. And like I do too, frankly. He is the identity of the Minnesota Twins. When you close your eyes and think, who is a Minnesota Twin? For me, it's Mauer. Yeah. Like I think
Kirby
Johan
Puckett.
Santana's there too, Kirby Puckett, Paul Molitor, if you want to do that, go ahead. But like
Max Kepler.
Sure. Kepler, yeah. Nick Gordon.
Wallner.
It's Mauer. Like I just think it's Joe Mauer, and being the identity of one franchise is enough for me to vote you in on the first ballot.
Yeah. So I'll be like a middle ground of that question, because for me it was like I would have voted for him first ballot because I've actually talked about this a lot in the past, and especially when he retired. I just people are like, oh, he didn't catch as much down the stretch, blah blah blah. Like I don't really care. Like, Buster Posey, and I know he's an even more extreme example because of the World Series titles and everything, but Posey had a shorter shelf life as well. A lot of catchers have shorter shelf lives. Like for me, if you have 10 years of dominance and 10 years where you are like, the best at your position, and at the end of your career, you still hit a lot of these important thresholds. I'm going to have a little bit of a different approach to the longevity aspect with catchers. And I look at Mauer, in terms of his like 5 to 7 year stretch of his peak, it's hard to argue that there was any catcher really more dominant than him. And it kind of spilled over into years where offense really started to tick downwards across the league. And, he still was incredibly, productive and solid. So, another guy too, where you just look at what he did in 2009 specifically, and it's just to lead the league in batting average, OBP, and slugging, and win that MVP. He's won Gold Gloves behind the dish. He's a Hall of Fame guy too, and that's always gonna end up pushing guys over the edge. I'd imagine if Joe Mauer was an asshole, he probably comes up just short this time around, considering how he just edged it out. So, I think that's part of it too, and being just from the area, being there, I think on top of just playing for the same team, like the guy's from Minnesota as well. He's from St. Paul. Yeah. So it's just pretty cool. That whole story, I think, just kind of adds to it and accentuates it. By the way, Jack, it was Ryan Spader.
Yeah.
Usually when we mention somebody, I say, go follow him. Don't. But yeah, Joe Mauer, phenomenal career.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I was a little bit surprised was a 124 OPS plus for his career combined with 55 WAR. That doesn't scream first ballot to me. But at the same time, I would have voted for him. But I'm a proponent more of a bigger haul. So I see the argument for a lot of these guys. And again, I would have voted for Joe Mauer. The fact that he is arguably one of the greatest offensive catchers, maybe of all time. There was an interesting debate on Foul Territory, our friends over there, between AJ Przinsky, Tim Kirkchin, and Ken Rosenthal about Jorge Posada, how he had a
Classic.
121 OPS plus for his career, played more games at catcher, actually had a similar on base, higher slugging than Joe Mauer, and was barely on the ballot, right? I think got 4 or 5%, while Joe Mauer was a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I think that more relates to the story, was Joe Mauer worth it to be a first ballot or not, when maybe other catchers didn't get the love and support. But then you talk about the fact that he spent 15 years in Minnesota, the fact that, ever since high school, this guy has been an all-world athlete, that at his peak, he was a much better player than Posada. Posada had an incredible career, and if Mauer was on the Yankees, imagine how many titles the Yankees would have won. So there's context there. But to put a bow on it, Jack, I know you're smiling. I would have voted Joe Mauer first ballot anyway. I guess looking at his numbers, 143 career home runs, I was a little bit surprised.
I just love that the Hall of Fame conversation always somehow circles back to the Yankees. And I'm not talking you specifically. I'm talking like every old voter too. It's like, hey, what would this guy have done if he was a New York Yankee? Right. It's like let's
But
just shut up for a minute. There are 29 other teams.
But think about it. Joe Mauer on the Yankees, though. Just think about it.
Oh my, it would have been so sick, dude. You're so right. So right.
Just think about it. And then think about Adrian Beltre on the Yankees. No,
Dude.
Let's talk about Adrian Beltre, 95% of the vote. I don't know who the 5% of the voters who aren't voting for Adrian Beltre. It's just one of those classic things, right? Like Mariano Rivera was the first unanimous. There have been plenty of unanimous Hall of Famers. And I don't know what else Adrian Beltre could have done to get your vote. I guess they could have said, hey, Aram, he didn't hit 500 home runs, only 477. This guy is one of the greatest third basemen of all time. He is third in WAR at the position behind guys like Mike Schmidt and Eddie Matthews. Absolute no-brainer when you just look at the stats. And then you factor in one of the most incredible personalities that we have had on the field. You hear former players talk about this guy, the way he commands a locker room, and then even fans can see it on TV. The fact that he's throwing balls at the third base coach as a joke. He seems to have a great relationship with every single player that would end up on third base. He'd be messing with all of them. One of the true joys of baseball. One of my favorite players growing up, Adrian Beltre, no-brainer. So happy to see him get in. And the only reason I'm upset, didn't get 100% of the vote.
Yeah, I mean, I that's got to be a surefire first ballot guy, right? Like 84 career FWAR.
Unbelievable.
What else do you need? I don't know where he came up short, because also on top of that is like he was a really solid defender for plenty of stretches. And again, it's just really hard to poke a hole in his game. I mean, he was one of the best defenders in the sport, especially at his position for stretches of years as well. So yeah, I don't know how you don't vote for him, but focusing on the positives, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head, like in terms of just being a fun player as well. Like all those compilations of him and Elvis Andrus were always great, but just being as consistent as he was, right? Not a guy that had as many of like the big like pop seasons as some of the other guys that we talked about. Like 2004 specifically, though, was an insane year for him. But it was even when in the years where the offense wasn't totally there for him, just able to provide so much value defensively and still give you a 3-4 win season. Then when you do that for 20 years, you're going to have a really nice career. But, I think Beltre was a surefire first ballot guy. Would have liked to see him be unanimous, but I can understand that. I guess, some people want to reserve that right to the best at their position, like of all time, like a Mariano. But I mean, Beltre's on Mount Rushmore. I was very close.
100%. 9.6 WAR season in 2004, like you mentioned. I did also mention this to our director of partnerships, Colby Olson. Second best WAR season of his career came with the Boston Red Sox. He posed the question, which hat does he wear going into the Hall? It's got to be the Red Sox for that 1 year.
Has to be.
Listen, he's going in with a Rangers hat. He has to. I know that he spent the first 7 years of his career in LA. He had 23 WAR in LA in 7 years. He had 41 WAR in 8 years in Texas. The best years of his life came in Texas. He's going to wear a Rangers hat. Has to.
I think he probably wears a Rangers hat. I just thought it was a discussion because his best year was in Los Angeles. He did start his career there, and it's not like he started his career and only was 3 or 4 seasons. He did spend 7 years there, but I agree with you. After looking deeper into it, it should be a Rangers hat, but maybe he goes in with the Dodgers because of Ohtani and Yamamoto. Maybe they give him $1 billion and defer
Probably.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, a deferred cap. So he's got to wear the Rangers for the first 10 years, but then the next 60 years, the bust is going to be changed to a Dodger hat. Got it.
Wouldn't that be poetic?
Surely.
Arm, anything else on Beltre?
No, that's all I got. One of my favorite, any third baseman, I'm gonna have third baseman bias. So I'm always pumped for him. I got a bunch of his cards, so not selling them though. I'm holding on to those for a long time.
Shout out Jimmy Leland before we move on to the mailbag. One World Series came with your Miami Marlins, Arm Layton. 3 pennants, 3-time manager of the year, now a Hall of Famer. And the founder of Sigs Inside, pretty much. This guy was doing Sigs in the dugout when he was managing the Detroit Tigers, which clearly is awesome.
People love to credit baseball managers for inventing things that I just feel like can't even be invented, right?
Dusty Baker, high five.
Dusty Baker invents the high five. Bobby Valentine invents the rap. Like, come on, like who's the next old head manager that's like they're gonna say he invented oxygen?
It's kind of like it's kind of like every fraternity claiming that they've invented beer pong.
Yes, correct. Like it's just it's the origin for them. But yeah, I mean, look, I love Leland. Apparently, he's had some quotes about getting the best out of players that makes me realize, okay, that's how that guy was such a successful manager for such a long time. And I know I've been able to talk to Jeff Conine a little bit about Leland. I know he absolutely loved him, and it's not surprising to him that he's a Hall of Famer. But Leland, some really funny sound bites from that guy too, if you ever catch him on an interview.
No, when I slightly disrespected Jim Leland in the intro when I said Jack really wants to talk about him. The only reason I said that was before we pressed the record button, I said, we got to talk about the Hall of Fame. And Jack's first words out of his mouth are Jim Leland. And I just thought it was funny because we have Adrian Beltre, Joe Bauer, and Todd Helton. But yeah, Jim Leland had a phenomenal career. He's been kind of the staple in the dugout, seems like my entire life watching baseball, that he was on at least one dugout. 506 winning percentage, Jack. That's my question.
Yeah.
That's my question.
I didn't hear a question mark there. I heard 506 winning percentage, Jack, period.
I think you overlooked winning percentage in 4 Sigs Inside.
Yeah, so here's the thing about baseball. Those winning percentages are going to be much lower than other sports. So like when you look at a football coach and when they retire, Nick Saban has a winning percentage near 750 or 800, you can't expect that from the best managers in baseball.
Also, you have to factor in that he managed the 98 Marlins. And the 98 Marlins will tank anybody's career winning percent. I don't care how long you manage. The 98 Marlins are tanking anybody's winning percentage. 54 and 108 that year. That wasn't Jim Leland's fault. That was
on the heels of a World Series.
Yeah, Wayne Huizenga, rest in peace, a huge fixture in South Florida sports. Got brought basically every single team here. But he burned it down in 98 and right after the World Series, and that team was ass. So that kind of cooked Jim Leland a little bit.
So before we move on to the mailbag, I do want to just touch on Billy Wagner. I'm just so tired of yelling into this mic year after year. Every single time we do the podcast, every single time we go over the Hall of Fame voting, he missed again. I've already done 2 rants. I don't want to do it again. But at the end of the day, is the second lowest ERA in Major League Baseball to Mariano Rivera, the greatest left-handed reliever of all time. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame post-dead ball era. Not if we're including Tim Keefe and those guys. Yeah. Post-dead ball era, 2.31 ERA to Mariano at 2.21. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
I think he should make a comeback, bolster his resume a little bit more, and then see if he can get in.
It doesn't make.
I watched a really solid NBC News feature on Billy Wagner yesterday. He was like kind of a capper at the end of the show with Lester Holt, and he's coaching high school in Charlottesville, Virginia. He was just coaching high school baseball on induction day, and he was just kind of standing in the cage like, I'm waiting for the call. I didn't get the call. I hope I get it soon. Like, I felt so bad for him, but he deserves it, man.
He'll get it. He's going to get in.
He's going to get it next year. He's
going to get it next year.
By the way, notable guys on the first ballot next year. I don't know if there's much traffic in front of him. Ichiro should be unanimous. He absolutely
he won't,
should.
Though. He won't, though, but he should be.
No.
Some asshole.
Yeah.
Because
We'll say,
what is it?
yeah, he didn't get
Ryan
enough home runs.
Finkelstein wouldn't vote for him.
Yeah, that's our managing editor would probably not vote for Ichiro first
What
ballot.
was like last year? Dan Shaughnessy voted for just Jeff Kent and nobody else. Like he's probably going to do some shit like that again. But Ichiro should get in unanimously. CC Sabathia and Felix Hernandez are the other two that are borderline first ballot. I think CC is closer to the first ballot than Felix Hernandez is. But if I were to guess right now, the Hall of Fame class next year would probably be Ichiro, Billy Wagner, Sabathia.
That's exactly how I would have put it. Do you think Felix sneaks in arm on the first ballot?
I think Felix might have an uphill battle to get in, period.
I agree.
It's a short shelf life for him.
I also don't know if CC is going to be first ballot.
I don't think CC will be first ballot either. I think he'll have a strong case. I think it'll be second year. I'm really interested to see how voters look at Felix. I mean, this guy, at 33 years old, just completely fell off. But I mean, that's a really short career. But at the end of the day, he came up so early and threw so many innings that he still did compile some really good numbers. So I'm interested to see how they go about it with Felix. I think he was up there with anybody. You look at his stretch of 6-7 years where he's pretty much top 5 in Cy Young, finishing every single season. But I think there's a legitimate chance it's just Billy and Ichiro.
Yeah. That would be my prediction as of now. I hope CC gets in on the first ballot, but it's going to be close. It's going to be close.